Welcome into the Diamond Vols Podcast on GoVols247.com. I am Ben McKee, and I am joined by Wes Rucker of GoVols247.com and former Tennessee pitcher Will Heflin. And I guess now we can add SEC Network plus ESPN plus Midweek Baseball plus broadcaster Will Heflin to the title. Excited to get back here on the interwebs with the fellas to talk some Tennessee baseball. Another season of Tennessee baseball is less than a month away. We are recording this just after noon on Wednesday. On Tuesday, January 14th, yesterday, it was exactly a month out away from first pitch on Valentine's Day. So happy to be back with the fellas, getting ready to talk some Tennessee baseball. We have added video. This is the first time we are on video with the Diamond Vols Podcast. It'll be posted on the GoVols247 YouTube page, so make sure you head over there and check that out if you would prefer to look at us, which I can understand wanting to look at Will. Wanting to look at me or Wes, that's a bold strategy, Cotton. I don't know why you would I don't know why you would want to look at us meat sticks over here. Will's obviously all propped up with his Omaha team behind him. I've still got a blank wall from when I moved in. And Wes, we've even got a new fan here on the podcast. For those who are not watching the video, Will had an acquaintance walk in his room, look like maybe a janitor. But
we're in office today, so
Will is in office.
Take a little break, and
we're rolling with the punches, and look, we're in preseason mode, like you said over text a couple of minutes ago, Will, and that was very fitting for that. So excited for a new season of Tennessee baseball. Excited for a new season of the Diamond Vols Podcast. I was trying to think earlier this morning how long I've been doing this podcast. It's been posted at GoVols247.com. Now this is the third season of Wes and myself doing it. This is Will's second full season of doing it with us. He hopped on there at the end of the 2023 season as Tennessee went off to Clemson, and Will's been kind enough to and gracious enough to give us a lot of his time. But I think I started this in 19 when Will's team first made the NCAA tournament. I think that was the first year I broke out and debuted the Diamond Vols Podcast. And so what's that now? 5 years? 6 years, something like that. Hard to believe that's been the case, but appreciate everybody tuning in. Will, Wes, enough of me talking and yapping. I know I'll do plenty of that this season, as I always do. But Wes, how are you, my friend?
Doing all right. Actually, just got back from the dentist about 15 minutes ago, and I got a couple of crowns put in today. So if you see me drooling on the podcast, that will probably be the reason why. I've got a nice liquid lunch here. It's that kind of a day, but doing all right. My wife, however, is not happy about some things because, she asked, we were just talking this morning. I told her we were doing a baseball podcast. She was like, "Oh my God, is it baseball season?" And I went, "Well, not yet, but like in 28 days." And she's like SEC basketball play just started. She's just looking at me like I'm going to have to watch this kid by myself all the time now. I was like, come in. Not really, but it's going to change.
For some reason, for me, it feels like there's more of an overlap this year. Like, I don't even think I guess it's because of the football playoffs and Tennessee was in it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even didn't even really have time to get into full basketball mode. And now I feel like I got to transition to baseball. And I wasn't sure we were going to drop that little nugget. But you started the podcast off. So I'm truly excited to get to call some games this year. It'll be on some of the streams, but they're giving me a shot. And I think this has definitely helped me with that, just getting ready. But obviously, you two played the biggest hand in kind of getting that ball rolling, or at least starting the idea. So that's where I'm at. I'm good. I'm in the office today, grinding this out, but I'm always ready to talk baseball and get preseason going. So it's, doesn't seem like the train's going to be slowing down anytime soon. And this team's got all the hopes that you could want and dream for, and all the pieces are there. So let's go ahead and dig into that and see how we look.
I was laughing about the the no overlap or the complete overlap thing, because it was not that long ago that we were sitting there in Omaha and Sean Barrows was leaving the press box for like the final time for the season or whatever. They were going back to the hotel. He's like, all right, we'll see you guys at SEC football media days in about a week. And everyone just went boo. So yeah, there's no overlap.
No, there's not, especially this year when SEC baseball starts a week early. Conference play starts a week early like it did last season. So there's a quite a significant overlap with the NCAA basketball tournament and the beginning of SEC play. If I'm not mistaken, Tennessee plays Florida the weekend of the SEC tournament, SEC basketball tournament, and then the next week they go to South Carolina, something along those lines. But it's the overlap because SEC basketball is so long now, especially when you add Texas and Oklahoma, and baseball adding Texas and Oklahoma, and the conference schedule starting a week earlier than it has in the past. It did the same thing last year, where it started a week earlier, and there's just a tremendous overlap between the two sports, especially for Wes and I, because we do a lot with basketball and baseball in addition to football. So it's a busy time of the year, but an enjoyable time of the year. As I always say, I'd rather be having to navigate all of this chaos than covering teams who are bad, because life would not be fun if that were the case, if nobody was winning. But right now, everybody is winning, and that is A-okay in my book. Will, you mentioned that this team has a lot of tools and pieces to get back to Omaha. It has all the talent in the world yet again. It's just unproven in a couple of different areas. We will certainly get into all the different areas that we are interested in learning about over the next couple of months, or the next couple of weeks, I should say, during preseason practice. We're going to discuss the storylines we're most looking forward to learning about during preseason practice in the second segment. But in this segment, and it does kind of tie in, first base is a position that everybody has been curious about all offseason long following Blake Burke's departure. But now, with the news earlier this week that Alex Perry is not going to be with the program this semester, it's become an even bigger question mark, because Alex Perry, who he battled injuries last year. I don't believe he could get a hamstring injury corrected, or it hampered him for quite some time, and just could never really settle in last season. So he only had 7 at-bats last year, but he committed and signed with Tennessee at a Pearl River Community College, which is one of the best JUCOs in the country. He was one of the best JUCO players in the country, a JUCO All-American. He's from Mississippi. Pearl River is in Mississippi. When he committed to Tennessee over Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and LSU. And at that time, Ole Miss and Mississippi State had just won the last 2 national championships, and he was choosing to leave the state to come play for Tennessee. So he was a significant pickup for Tennessee on the recruiting trail. And then last year, obviously playing behind Billy Amick. He can play a lot of different positions, but third base and shortstop is probably his primary positions and what Tennessee signed him as. But last year, you have Dean Curley. You have Ariel Antigua battling for that spot last year at the beginning in the preseason. You have Billy Amick coming in from Clemson. You have Christian Moore at second base, and Simo could have also played shortstop or third base if you needed him to. So there's a lot of talent in front of him. And as Tony has said a couple of times publicly, Alex Perry was in the running to be the opening day shortstop and had a nice fall when he first got to Tennessee, had a nice preseason, and then ran into that hamstring injury that he couldn't quite get right, and was never able to really find a role on last year's team because of the amount of talent that the team had, but also because of the injuries that he dealt with. And he comes back this fall and is kind of playing all over the place, still playing third, short, second. He was in the corner outfield spots a couple of different times. And he also played first. And Dalton Bargo, who is also in the running to be the opening day first baseman, he injures his thumb, his hand. He has to miss a good portion of the fall, the back half of the fall, and that kind of opened the door for Perry to get a bunch of reps over there, amongst others, and we'll talk about the others as well. But what I'm getting to is that in my mind, for several weeks or the time period in between fall wrapping up and really until I found out that he was stepping away from the program to deal with a personal matter, we'll leave it at that. I spoke with Alex earlier this week, and he just wants to kind of focus on himself, focus on his schoolwork. At this time, he does not intend to enter the transfer portal, and he hopes to sit down with Coach Vitello in the future and potentially come up with a plan to where he does rejoin the program maybe next season. But that's a separate conversation much further down the road. But up until we learned earlier this week that he was not going to be with the team this semester, I viewed him as the front runner to be the opening day first baseman because A, that's a big question mark for Tennessee. B, he has a tremendous bat, and that's kind of what he was known for when he signed with Tennessee. And he had a great fall. He had a really good fall, hit the ball well. Tony spoke highly of him on multiple occasions about the fall that he was having, commended him for putting the team first and the team's needs first because, again, like I said, he's more of a shortstop at third baseman, but he's willing to play first. And shortstop is the more flashy position in baseball, and so is third base, more so than first. So sacrificing maybe some individual wants for the team needs, and Tony really appreciated that. But now there's a big question mark of who is the first baseman. We'll go through those options like I mentioned. Dalton Bargo seems to be the front runner. But just initially, Wes, it's a tough situation for Tennessee, or maybe not a tough situation. I think the best way to put it, at least in my mind, is it's just not ideal because he was capable of having a big year with the bat. You already had questions at the position, especially defensively, and this only further complicates those questions.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's excuse me. I think I always think of roster construction. I have that old National League brain. You know what I mean? Like the whole, you need a couple of utility guys, right? And I know that baseball is different now that there's, the DH everywhere, but I always think about wanting as many utility players as I can on a roster, guys who can play different places. And, this is a guy who it's unfortunate for him. Hopefully things get sorted out, but he goes through all last season and he didn't have the year he wants. And then things are kind of, the doors open for him. And then, stuff happens, and that's, excuse me, that's unfortunate. But I think, hold on a second, I'm having an issue with my mic again. I think that it's unfortunate. It's not what you want. They do have guys, they have enough probably, but having a guy who could play on the infield, having a guy who could, play shortstop, third, first, could go to the corner outfield, you just can never have enough of those guys. And it's unfortunate to lose one. Obviously, the first thing you think about is the person, but as far as the team goes, that's the drill at the end of the day, right? They'll be fine, but you always have guys who can play first. It's not like a position where it's like you don't have a shortstop. Oh no, like, shortstop, center field, second base. There's a few places where you need a guy who exactly how good he is defensively, and that's super important. And I played a lot of first base. I'm not saying it's not important. And a really good first baseman will save you runs all season long. He'll save you errors. He'll save you base runners. And so, but if you have an okay defensive player there, you can live with that. It's not the end of the world, especially if there's a plus bat that comes with it. Or if you're going to have a guy who has a great glove, you can maybe get away with not having like the power numbers you normally see from that position. So it's not ideal, but I still look at it and I think, if Bargo is your first baseman, you're fine. Like, that's fine. You can win a lot of games. He's a really good player. He might have eventually won the job anyway. So it's unfortunate, but it's just the way it goes, man. You saw something similar in some ways with Zane Denton before. Like, you feel for the guy, but at the end of the day, the other 35 guys got to go do the job.
Yeah, I look at it the same way. It's just you don't know because you didn't get to see it play out, right? So we don't know what kind of year he could have had. And the other thing I think about too is like Tennessee's the opposite of everybody else when it comes to what type of bats you feel like you have a plethora of. And the last couple of years, it's like we need right-handed hitters, and so you lose that. But I mean, when you run through it, you think you've got Curley and Inslee, and then Peoples hits from both sides. But just for the most part, like Tennessee, kind of different than everybody else. Maybe ECU was another one that was just like all lefties, but Tennessee, you hate to lose value from the right side of the plate in terms of hitting, especially after Christian Moore left last year. So, like I said, or like you guys said, you don't know because you're not going to know. You won't get to find out, but you just gotta move on, and somebody will step up and figure it out. Because I mean, this time last year we weren't really talking about Dean Curley, and he ended up being the guy every single day. So there'll be somebody like that this year. It may not be at first base, but it'll be somewhere. And I really do like Bargo, but he is left-handed and he could have played somewhere else. So we'll see.
Yeah, I always forget that. I always forget that, that both of the big touted guys who come in, the infielders, are both left-handed hitters. I forget, like I always knew that. I don't think of it like that. They're both left-handed hitters. Like I knew each of them individually. I guess I'm like, oh yeah, he is a lefty. But then you think about it and you go, yeah, they're so left-handed. They are so left-handed.
They would love to add a right-handed power bat. They would absolutely love to if they could
add one.
Yes, they would love to add one early in the
preseason
if they were able to. What's that?
Are you leaving crumbs for our loyal viewers and listeners?
The first thing that popped into my mind when Alex Perry, the news came out earlier this week that he was no longer with the program, was about Dalton Bargo, Mr. Heflin, and the fact that Wes made a great point of, hey, he may have won the job anyways. It's not like Alex had just locked down the position. And what's so unique about, and it's more so, you see this more in college baseball than you do in professional baseball, because at this level, guys are still playing multiple positions. They haven't honed in on one specific position. So there's a lot of versatility. And there's a handful of guys on this year's roster. Alex was one of them. But like Stone Lawless, Dalton Bargo, Jay Abernathy, the true freshman, who he's not going to play first base, but a Manny Marine, another highly touted freshman, a Chris Newstrom, another highly touted freshman. Like, these guys all play multiple positions. And a couple of those guys, like I look at a Stone Lawless and a Dalton Bargo, and like they're most likely two of your best 9 bats at minimum. I think Stone may be a top 5 bat on the team. Tennessee has something really special there with Stone Lawless. It's just a matter of, okay, where's he going to play? Cannon Peebles has the catcher's position locked down, it seems. I would expect as of today that Cannon Peebles is going to catch 2 a weekend. Stone probably gets the 3rd game each weekend to keep Cannon fresh. Of course, Dalton Bargo is going to be in the mix over there at catcher as well. But because Cannon kind of has catcher right now, has that position locked down at the moment, where do you try and slide in Dalton Bargo and a Stone Lawless? Because those are two, again, like I was saying, they're 2 of your best 9 bats, but they're not the starting catcher as of today. And that's why when I first found out about the Alex Perry news, my mind immediately went to, well, Dalton Bargo has a home now over there at first base. And I'm sure that he will continue to move around. But just, there were times last year where Bargo, his versatility was a benefit to Tennessee. But there were also times where I felt like all 3 of us felt as if the fact that he wasn't playing every day at times, or he had not settled into one position or settled into playing every day, maybe hurt his performance at the plate, because baseball is such a sport based on repetitions. And the more you play, the more comfortable you're going to feel, the better you're going to do. So the fact that maybe he now has an everyday spot, even if he can play multiple spots, corner outfield, third base, first base, catcher, DH, I think that's a great thing, that maybe he can find a rhythm over there at first base, where it didn't feel like he could find a rhythm because he was kind of in and out of the lineup. That was where my thoughts first went when I first found out about the Alex Perry news, is that, okay, well, maybe this opens up the door for Dalton Bargo, because he was going to play a lot as is. The question was just where.
Yeah, maybe so. And all along we were saying it last year, like all those guys who split duties at DH, you just kind of thought like, man, if one of them can create separation and get consistency and be in there every day, then they would, that would help them personally. But it just didn't play out that way ever. I don't think. I think it was kind of a rotation all the way through, and obviously worked out. You won the national championship. But if I'm talking on Dalton Bargro's behalf, it's better for Dalton if he's in there every day. It gives him a better chance to, have timing, have a routine, all that sort of stuff. And the coaches know that too, but they got to do what's best for the lineup. So,
and I think we've had this conversation at times last season. We may have even done it the season before, but I know we did it last season some. But I think as Tennessee continues to stack these recruiting classes and bring these guys in and keep guys out of the draft and do the things that they're doing now, it's not necessarily the worst problem. I can think of many worse problems to have, like not having anybody would be a big problem. I've seen Tennessee where it didn't have a lot of guys. That's a bigger problem. But some guys, baseball players, a lot of them naturally just are better when they play every day. And some guys can hit at a high clip off the bench. Some guys can do that. Some guys don't do it as well. And it's just hard because you're recruiting all these guys and they all could have gone just about anywhere now. You look at Tennessee's roster now, just about all those guys could go just about anywhere. If any of them were to like step into the portal tomorrow, they would have everybody interested in them because that's the kind of players Tennessee has had. When you do that, you're going to have like a second 9 basically every season that they're good enough to play. And so in terms of roster construction, in terms of chemistry, in terms of all these things, they have to keep nailing the evals, both in terms of the physical stuff, but also the mental stuff, the personality stuff, because they're going to have guys who, if you don't play for a year much, you're going to have to be okay with that. And it's hard to find guys who are good enough to go play at Tennessee, who could turn down offers from all these other places and then maybe not play. And so that the only good thing about Perry leaving is maybe there's one less risk of one of those type situations now. And so, yeah, but to the point earlier, it would be kind of nice if that person was right-handed, but if it's Bargo, then it's Bargo and you roll with him. He can hit a lefty.
Yes, and you want Bargo in the lineup, as we have alluded to. And the big question, they were always going to have a bat over there at first base. That's not the question that was ever pondered. It was not, because even if Alex had won the starting job, opening day first baseman, and then he struggled for the first couple of weeks, they had other options that they could have tried over there offensively. The question is, do they have somebody defensively? Because Wes made great points earlier about the first base position. It's not the most valuable position on the field, but look how much value Blake Burke gave Tennessee defensively from his sophomore year to his junior year. He was a bit of a liability over there at his sophomore year. And last year, he was an absolute vacuum. And, how many conversations did we have about Christian Moore's defense, Billy Amick's defense? They had their struggles at times, and that was with Blake saving those two guys from even more errors throughout the course of the season. So the glove over there can be very valuable, of course, and that's the big question at that position going into the season is not whether or not they can find offense, because they have a number of guys who can hit that you can stick over there and see if they can prove to be consistent offensively. The question is, what are they going to do defensively? Do they have a guy over there that they trust defensively? And it feels like there's going to be some growing pains, but we'll run through some of these names here in just a moment. But it kind of reminds me, or not reminds me, but the point that I'm getting to is you'd rather be in the position that Tennessee is going into this season than the situations that your teams had to deal with when Luke got hurt early one season. Well, what was it? He strained his wrist or something along those lines.
Yeah, and then one year it was the broken nose.
Yes. But the 1 year he had a wrist issue. I can't remember if he had surgery, but he practically missed the rest of the season, or at least like a month or two of the season. He had gotten off to a really good start, and you're like, oh, here's Andre's brother. He's hitting the ball really well, and then boom, an injury like right before SEC play, and you didn't have a ton of options to turn to. Was that true freshman Max Ferguson over that first base after Luke got hurt, if I remember correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
Max
it was a lot. It was
fine,
a lot. But Max was phenomenal at first base. I mean, he was a infielder that they put a different glove on him. And Pete Durkee did a fine job too, but he wasn't adding. I wouldn't say his metrics were like he's saving a bunch of runs defensively. Pete was in there to hit.
Yes. And that's what Tennessee has right now is a bunch of guys that can hit. But you also had Max dealt with an injury at a certain point as well when he was over that first. And so my point is that you were really limited in options. But now, Wes, you have multiple options. Dalton Bargo, I think we all agree, is the front runner as of January 15th. And then you have a couple of tiers in my mind, Dalton Bargo being in the front runner tier.
And not Kavars's brothers.
No, not Kavars's
dad joke. Go ahead.
That was a very good dad joke. But you have a couple of talented youngsters right behind Dalton Bargo who are potentially intriguing options. You have Stone Lawless. I spoke about him. When he's not catching, I'd love to see him get a shot over there at first base or at DH. I just think you have to have Stone Lawless in the lineup. I think he's one of your best 9 hitters, if not one of your best 5 or 7 hitters. I just think you really want him in the lineup. He hits for power. He hits gap to gap. He's an extra base hits machine. The team loves him. Last year, the veteran players on the team were adamant that Stone Lawless needed to travel with the team while he was not playing as a true freshman because of how good of a young man he is and how beloved he is in that locker room. So you have Stone Lawless. I'd like to see him get at bats wherever that is, whether it's giving a day off to Peebles behind the plate, whether it's at DH, whether it's at first. Alex Perry's departure opens up the door for more at bats for Stone Lawless, which I think is a good thing. But I don't know that they're just going to transition him to first base at this moment. I think he's still going to platoon with Peebles to a certain extent in preparation of him being ready to be the catcher next season. But then you have 2 true freshmen who first base isn't their natural position, but they were extremely talented players coming out of high school. And those 2 guys are Levi Clark and Chris Newstrom. And Levi Clark was Tennessee's highest ranked hitter in this past year's signing class. He had a good fall for it being his first fall. He did sign as a catcher, but he worked at first base. He even worked out in left field and in right field. He did not look like he was out of place when I saw him at first base in the fall. Chris Newstrom is a big-time prospect from Arizona. He can play a bunch of different positions as well, probably signed as more of a third baseman, but is uber athletic and can truly play just about every position on the field. And those are 2 bats that Tennessee really, really likes. So if something were to happen to Bargo or Stone is catching or something along those lines, it would not be out of left field for Levi Clark or Chris Newstrom, 2 freshmen, to get opportunities. They are capable of contributing at this level as true freshmen, and Tennessee was glad that they avoided the draft with both of those guys. Both of them were draft risks, and they were able to make it to campus, especially Levi Clark. And then the last 2 that I'll mention, Wes, as potential options is Hunter High and Blake Grimmer. Those 2 guys have been in the program. This is Blake Grimmer's 3rd year, if I'm not mistaken, and this is Hunter's 2nd year. Hunter High reminds me of Jared Dickey. The batting stance is a little quirky. Mm-hmm. Hunter plays all over the field. He's a contact and barrel machine, and had his moments in the fall where he looked really good, but he can play corner outfield. He can play first. He can play a lot of different positions as well. So I'm sure he'll get an opportunity here and there to maybe show what he can do. And then Blake Grimmer was a highly ranked recruit at one point in his high school career, and has been around the program. And it would not be out of left field to see Blake Grimmer be in there at first base at a different point in time. But those are some of the names, along with Dalton Bargo, Levi Clark, Chris Newstrom, Stone Lawless, Hunter High, Blake Grimmer, that could potentially find their way over there at first base. Again, a lot of guys that can hit, but who can pick it defensively?
Yeah, Grimmer is an interesting name to me because if I remember correctly, and I think I do, he's from Michigan, and so guys who come from places like that, sometimes they take a little bit longer in their careers to develop because they haven't been able to play year round. I know hitting facilities, indoors, all these things these days, but there's no substitute for pure baseball. I think those guys sometimes take longer to develop, but when they do, they can be just as good as anybody else. That's just it. Sometimes takes longer. But and not to paint with a broad brush, but I think historically, when you look at baseball, and as a guy who played the game for a little bit, as a guy who's been around the game a whole life, if you can play catcher at a reasonable level, you can play first base at a reasonable level. Like, you can defensively, so many of those skills translate. You're picking the ball the same, you're looking, your vision of the field is similar in some ways. The footwork, some of that stuff is identical too. There's a lot of things about that you can do. And you're also probably throw better than most first basemen do. So there are things there. And if you can play shortstop, you can play anywhere. If you can play shortstop, you can play anywhere on the field. So those are the two positions I think of that if you don't have a plethora of like natural first basemen, which Tennessee just doesn't seem to have right now, then you can always take a catcher and move them to first. You can always take a shortstop and move them to first. Now, they may not have like the hands of someone like Ellipsius or someone who'd been around, lefty who played that position their whole career. But playing on turf, I would say, mitigates some of that because you're getting a true bounce of the ball more often than not. You're not dealing with that weird ball that kind of comes off the lip of the grass, and that's a different pick than anything else is. The field conditions when you're playing on dirt and grass are different for a first baseman, but you're playing on turf, especially for your home games and a lot of other places you go on the road. So that, to me, you're okay. You're going to be okay there defensively. No matter what you do, you'll be okay. But this might give you an opportunity to go with just the best bat you can, and that fills out your lineup a little bit. So people smarter than us will be making that decision. But I think, I still would like to have like a couple more like pure first basemen on the roster. But it didn't go that way. So now you got to go with what you got. But they do have some extra catchers. They do have a bunch of infielders. They can make it work.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that. Like the last several years, we've had just a true first baseman. But when you think about if you have a son who's playing high school baseball, like what's the easier way to get recruited to a Division I college program? It's like put him in short, put him in center, and they'll say, okay, we'll take him. We can put him anywhere. It's hard to. They're just not as common on college teams. Just a purebred first baseman. So. Yep. That is an interesting little nugget. The other thing I was thinking of is, last year they open up in Arlington playing against Texas Tech. This year they're opening up at home. I believe it's Bellarmine.
Hofstra.
I'm sorry. It's basketball season.
The Donstone Dubar Bowl.
With all due respect to Hofstra, it's not Texas Tech. There will be more opportunities to see all of those guys from the jump this year, which we did not have last year. Blake Burke played, maybe something happened that I'm forgetting, but I think he played 27 innings that opening weekend. Whoever plays first base, I'd be shocked if they played more than 2 games at most. I wouldn't be shocked. I would be very surprised if we didn't see a new first baseman all 3 days. Even if one of those guys is in the lineup again, it'll be somewhere else, DH or outfield. But I just think that's one of the advantages of opening up at home and not in such a important RPI type environment. You're going to get that a couple weeks later when you go to Minute Maid. So that's
not Minute Maid anymore.
It's not Minute Maid?
No, they changed the name.
Oh, whatever.
They're going to Houston. Off-season.
They're going to Houston to play where the Trash Can Bangers play. And that'll be
Dakin. I don't know how to pronounce this company.
Well, it's
Dakin Park.
Pete Durkee Park.
Peter
Pete
Park.
Durkee Park.
So when
Peter
they go
Park.
play,
Peter Park would be a phenomenal baseball stadium name.
yeah, Peter Parker Park, Spider-Man Park.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, it's our preseason or my preseason. You guys are in full swing. I will admit though,
I'm never in full
I think
swing.
most of your viewers / listeners are probably year-rounders. Like it's Tennessee content that they want. I'm much
Mostly.
more like before I was on with you guys, I consumed 98% baseball versus anything else. So I know you guys have been doing podcasts, but I'm getting back warmed up and just getting used to being on the mic again.
It ain't a crime.
You already sound better than I do.
Last thing on that point is, yes, we will get to see a lot of them. Maybe some ground is gained, but then mentioning that tournament in Houston at Peter Parker Park, you'll see guys, cement jobs for at least the next few weeks headed into SEC play in environments like that, which is good. So that's kind of the upside to not opening up in a crazy tournament like some of those guys do. There's definitely advantages to both. Like, you want to play good competition, but you've got 56 games. Let's find ourselves a little bit.
And who knows? Tony Vitello always has tricks up his sleeve. He and his staff do not leave any stones unturned. Maybe he pulls another rabbit out of his hat. Who knows? You never know with that Tony Vitello fella. So
not till the lineup's turned in, you don't.
Nope. He will exhaust all avenues and all opportunities until
Remember, we never get the roster, Ben, until like the very last minute every single season. Like it's like whatever deadline it is to like fill in your roster. I'm not saying that he's a procrastinator, but we get that thing at the very last minute. You can possibly get it every year.
And that's because he is up until the very last minute making roster decisions. And I think that will be the case once again this year. Still plenty of storylines to discuss. First base will be a big one that we follow throughout the preseason. There are others that we will also be following this preseason, and we will discuss those on the other side of this quick timeout here on the Diamond Vols Podcast on GoVols247.com. Welcome back into the Diamond Vols Podcast on GoVols247.com. I am Ben McKee, and I'm joined by Wes Rucker, also of GoVols247.com, and former Tennessee pitcher Will Heflin. We have been discussing Alex Perry's departure from the program for the semester, what that means for the first base position going into preseason practice, which starts next Tuesday, I believe, on the 21st. The 21st is the first day of school, the spring semester, and that's when they can begin practicing. I don't know that Tennessee has finalized its first day of practice because, like what Wes was saying with Tony about the roster, not getting that completely done until the very last moment. Tony never really finalizes his practice schedule until the very last moment as well. So he very much goes with the flow and the hour and the day. And even if he has set the day ahead first thing in the morning, that is very likely to change. Well, how many times did a practice schedule change throughout your career?
Just go to the field when you're done with class and see how it plays out.
Yeah,
I liked it that way, but it has to be. It's a combination of things: weather, class schedules. You've got guys that need to pitch. Maybe they had a test. All kinds of stuff. Lifting, and V's going to be there. He wants everybody else to be there. Just go and do things when they tell you to do them.
Yep. Once Tony has landed in his helicopter across the street, that's when practice begins. Before we continue our conversation here on the podcast, we'd like to take a moment to encourage you to go like, rate, and review the podcast wherever you find all of your GoVols 24/7 podcasts. This will be in the feed prior to the basketball game tonight, and then we will also have one around lunchtime tomorrow posted recapping the latest football news, which includes the news that Tim Banks has re-signed or signed a contract extension to remain defensive coordinator, and then also a top 25 matchup with the basketball team, Tennessee and Georgia tonight. Wes and I will share our thoughts on that game and recap whatever happens in that as well. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. And if there's a Tennessee fan out there in your life that hasn't quite found our baseball podcast, the longest running podcast devoted only to Tennessee baseball. There's a Tennessee baseball fan out there and they want more Tennessee baseball. Point them in to the podcast that has always been devoted to baseball. We would greatly appreciate that. Will, aside from first base, that is obviously a position that we have exhausted on this edition of the podcast, this podcast episode. Which storyline are you most intrigued to follow along with throughout the next couple of weeks leading up to first pitch and learn about?
Well, I'm a pitcher, so the pitching staff, more specifically the bullpen. When I think everybody's kind of assuming Nate Snead will get a chance to start.
I believe that to be true.
You lost Kirby, you lost Combs, you lost Snead, in quotes, if you're just looking at the bullpen. So there's a lot of innings to be filled. And you've got Binky back, you've got Dylan Loy. Those are two lefties, but heard that Loy is fighting for a starting job. So we'll see what kind of role he ends up taking over. But just in terms of the storyline thing as a whole, we're not covering Georgia football here. We don't have a bunch of off-season stuff to dig through. So we talk about first base because that's pretty much all we got. We want to talk about something, but yeah, I think, nobody worries about a Frank Anderson pitching staff. Nobody worries about the results that we're going to get. I think at this point, it's pretty fair to assume that it's going to be a really good bullpen. It just comes down to who and how it looks and how they do it. And if it doesn't work in the beginning, they'll figure out how to do it and change it, because they did that last year with the starting rotation and the roles were kind of switching, throughout the year. But I am very interested to see how they use some of the newer guys, some of the transfer portal arms, freshman arms, some of those big talents that came in, and me being biased towards pitching. That's, where I'm always going to look at first.
Yeah, I think more sort of specific position-wise and battles, I think I'm always interested to see how a pitching staff's going to shake out like anybody else. I mean, you want to know, all right, who can you just pencil in or Sharpie in as like, this guy's going to have this role. And then you can kind of start building puzzle pieces around that once you figure out where some guys are. But there's a lot of uncertainty with the staff, and like a lot of other, college pitching staffs, to Will's point earlier, you got guys who are starting, it could be relievers, guys who are relievers who could be starters. I mean, you're just trying to get 9 innings 4 times a week. Like, that's what you're trying to get to. And in what order do they get to those things? We'll see. And will they be able to get things sort of not nailed down, but going into SEC play by that point, will they have a pretty good idea of at least 2 of the 3 weekend starters and at least a couple of, important positions in the bullpen? That's what I'm curious about. And then in terms of just globally,
well, let's stick with the pitching for a quick moment before we switch over to the hitting, if that's where I assume you were going.
Mine was more of an overall picture thing, but I can talk about it later. It's not a big deal.
You go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. I had a couple of pitching stuff I want to throw at y'all. Mine's
just, it's that age-old story of what happens when the dog chases or catches the car. The dog's been, since Tony Vitello's been in Tennessee, it's been just this pursuit where everybody figured Natty was probably going to come at some point. It was just a matter of when would it come, and it, came fairly early in terms of how, in his tenure as a head coach. So, that program that's been kind of the nipping at everybody's heels, trying to get into the big boys club, well, now they're there. They've won a Natty, and does that change anything? I think it's going to make people that were excited to play you even more excited to play you. So you will need to be supplying your own energy, your own focus, your own drive every day, every time you step on the field. And I mean, I think we're all pretty certain that Tony Vitello won't allow any kind of complacency, but how hard will he have to fight, if at all, to get this team to that level? Because, I think we all know there's going to be a couple times during the season where even if they win a game, it's closer than they expected, or, it's just a couple days where they're kicking the ball around too much or not focused in. And And Tony Vitello is going to go on this big long rant about how this year's team hasn't won anything. Last year's team was the national champions. This team has done nothing. And a lot of these guys who are everyday players in this team, they were not a part of every day of the national championship picture. So these guys think they know, they don't know. And we know he's going to say that. It's fair enough. But how quickly will he have to resort to that? and sort of what will the vibe of this team be? Because Ensley coming back, big deal. There's a couple guys that you're able to bring back, and they're important guys in the building, in the facility every day. But there's also a lot of new guys in the program. There's a lot of guys stepping into new responsibilities. There's guys who are big names at other programs, and now they're here. How will they mesh? How will it all go? You're putting in the puzzle pieces together every year, but this year you're complicating it by, well, you won the national championship last season. So I'm super fascinated to see how all that goes.
I am too. And it's critical that all the pieces fit together. And it is absolutely fair to wonder. On one hand, it's something to monitor, pay attention to, see how it plays out, because they've got to go prove it. On the other hand, I think we would all be stunned if any of those things were an issue.
Correct.
They were out recruiting the morning after the championship parade.
He's a psycho. He is a psycho.
Not he, all of them. Elander, well, I think Elander's flight left before Tony's. And if they didn't have the championship parade, they would have been out recruiting the morning after they won the championship. They were irritated
Psychos.
Of how far they were behind, because that was in the middle of the summer, essentially. They had not been hosting as many portal guys as other programs were that weren't in Omaha. And in the middle of the summer, that's when all the different travel ball, AAU, summer ball stuff is going on, all the big fancy tournaments. I mean, they were behind the eight ball in that regard. And Tony was annoyed that he was not able to be out doing those things. So I would be very surprised if any of those became an issue. And even aside from that, like the motivation side, we talked about this in the summer. Nearly everybody on the roster has something to prove. I mean, how many guys on the roster don't have something to prove? Hunter Ensley, Dean Curley, who else? Cannon Peebles has something to prove. Dalton Bargo has something to prove. Nate Snead has something to prove if he's moving to the starting rotation. Liam Doyle, Andrew Fisher, they've got something to prove. Who else? Yeah. Reese Chapman, he's got something to prove. I know Wes thinks he'd be hitting 400 and in the three-hole and every
three-hole anywhere else, man. Three-hole anywhere else. Every time
he'd be hitting three-hole for the Cubs.
Every time he got a big hit. Yeah, those jokes were made at my expense anytime he didn't hit the ball hard. Every time he hit the ball hard, it got real quiet in that press box. It got real quiet.
No. We never disagreed with your thought that he has a lot of potential. We disagreed with your assessment that he would hit in the top half of every other SEC lineup is what we disagreed with in that press box. What's that?
I said most other. That was also changed over time. I said most, and I stand by it, and it was true. When I said it, it's true now.
It seems like 50 years ago. I honestly don't even remember your exact wordage, but I'll take your word for it. But like these guys, and then all the transfer and JUCO guys and incoming freshmen, like, I mean, outside of Hunter Ensley and Dean Curley and Nate Snead, like who can be complacent? And not that those guys should, but like outside of those three guys, I mean, Andrew Binky has something to prove. Marcus Phillips has something to prove. A lot of guys do. Everybody but the three that I mentioned have something to prove. And even Snead and what looks like is going to be a new role for him has something to prove. And Tony has been very complimentary publicly, and the staff privately behind the scenes has been very complimentary about how the team worked in the fall. They really like this group with the way that they work, the way that they gelled together. We'll see how it translates once the bullets start firing. But they really do like this bunch and think that they're made of the right stuff. We'll see if that results in wins. The question that I wanted to pose pitching-wise, Will, before we transition to a little hitting outside of first base, was the thoughts on Nate Snead moving to the starting rotation. I don't know that's 100% official, but it seems likely that he is going to receive a chance to start. And I don't even know that they're going to come out and say, yes, Nate Snead is a starter. Because of the whole competition aspect of it, you want him to still earn it, and you don't want to give somebody something. I think the only thing we know about the pitching staff, like in terms of 1000% going to have this role is Liam Doyle is going to be one of your 3 starting pitchers. I assume in game 1 because of his Drew Gilbert attitude on the mound. Tony likes that going into the weekend and setting the tone, kind of like Chad Dallas did a couple of years ago. So I know Liam Doyle is going to be a starter. I assume that it'll be game 1. But other than that, I mean, this staff has a lot to prove and a lot to sort out. The talent is there. They have all the talent in the world, as you talked about, and you don't doubt Frank Anderson. But I'm curious your thoughts on Nate Snead getting an opportunity to be the starting pitcher, to be a starting pitcher. And do you want to be bold? And then, Wes, you pick it up after Will. Do you all want to be bold and predict your starting 3? I'll say it's Liam Doyle, Nate Snead, and Tegan Coons, the true freshman, with also Dylan Loy as an option, like you mentioned, Will. Brandon Arvidsson is going to have a key role in this team, but what does that role look like? Is it as a starter? Is it out of the bullpen? I like that Snead is getting an opportunity to start personally. We'll see if he can maintain that velo. Wes talked about that a bunch last year. It's real easy to come in from the bullpen and just let those bullets fly. How does he handle having to maybe preserve some in the tank throughout an outing? That's something that we'll learn about Nate. But I do like that they're giving him a chance, and I think it'll be him, Doyle, and Tegan Coons if I had to predict here on January 15th.
Yeah, I like that 3. I like that mix, and AJ Russell is going to be back at some point. And, you know, from what little I know, it was the revision surgery. So, you know, not a full TJ, giving me much more confidence that he'll be able to put in a more sizable workload that I'm sure he wants to provide to the team, and that they obviously want to get out of him. So if you've got him back at some point, you can go ahead and pencil him in somewhere. But I'm not going to be super bold on anything. I will say the one time I was over there in the past couple months and got to see a scrimmage, I saw Brandon Arvidsson throw, who is a wiry.
You saw me too.
I saw you too, but you weren't on the mound from the left side throwing BBs. And I was like, who in the heck is this? I mean, he's tall, he's long, he moves well. Look for him to do something. I don't know what it is. We'll see. I need to see him in a game. And it was just one day, and it was kind of cloudy, you know, not super great baseball weather. I think it was rainy too, but it was coming out pretty good when he was letting it go. So I know they're excited to see kind of what he can do when the lights get turned on. So we'll see there. But I'll go with the same rotation, honestly. I know Tegan Coons came in as a highly touted recruit. He's got good pitchability. If he's a strike thrower, I don't see why they wouldn't throw him out there with the ceiling that's there from his side of things. And you know, I think talking about Snead, I'm 100% cool with running him out there as a starter. I think he showed even in his longer outings out of the pen, he's free and easy. You know, he doesn't have to hump up to get 94, 97, which is plenty enough. And we'll see what kind of development he made, you know, this last offseason. He may come out and just be able to cruise 98 for 6 innings. If he can do that and throw strikes like he did, why wouldn't you start the guy every week? So if he, you know, if it turns out he's more comfortable and more successful out of the bullpen, then pivot when that time comes. But I think you start the season with him as a starter, because that's the highest ceiling for him and your team. And then you go from there, and it's that simple. And I don't want to make any bold claims like he's going to stay or he's going to move, because it doesn't matter. He's going to help Tennessee regardless, and they'll figure out the best way for him to do that once they see how things go and reevaluate. And it's a weekly thing. And the last thing I'll say, Wes, you can add to this too. There has never been the same 3 throughout the year that it is the opening weekend. So whoever it is, as great as it may be or as bad as it may be, it won't be the same. Unfortunately, if it's great, it won't be the same. Somebody will get hurt. Somebody will step up and take somebody's job. It's just the way it is. Like there's so many weekends and there's 3 starting jobs. So stuff happens. It hardly ever stays the same. I think in Frank's career, he said it's happened once. and guy's been coaching ball a while. So
Yeah,
go ahead, Wes.
no matter what sport it is, I'm a big proponent of at least letting players know that they have been given a fair shot to do what they want. I think that's important for sort of vibe within a program. I mean, at the end of the day, coaches make decisions and players have to respect that or leave. But I think, like you see this a lot in football, like you sign a guy who can play a couple different positions and you think he might be a wide receiver, but he thinks he's a quarterback. So, okay, you come here for the first spring, at least you're a quarterback, and we'll go from there. And so if Nate Snead wants to be a starter and you think he can be a starter, or at least that's an option, yeah, throw him in there and let him try it. And that way, if it doesn't work, you can always, pivot back to whatever you were doing. Selfishly, I think it's cool to see 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. I mean, they're much more common than they used to be, but there's a different vibe in a stadium when triple digits go up on a board. And I don't know why that is. It just is. And it hypes up a dugout. It gets a crowd more invested. It's fun. And I think when you have a guy who can storm out of the pen and just here's 100 right down your face, I love that. It's one of my favorite things in baseball. So I think Tennessee needs to do what it needs to do with Snead. And if he ends up being good enough to be a starter, then be a starter. That's fine. But I would guess for opening weekend, I would go Doyle, Snead, and then I think I would not be surprised if Tony goes into the season like giving Loy a shot on Sunday or something like that. I think I'm not saying he's a sentimental guy in terms of, business decisions at the end of the day, but when you have taken the ball for him in a big game and done some big things for him at times, he's not the kind of guy who forgets that. So I think, he might say, all right, all things being equal, Arvidson's got the bigger stuff, yada, yada. You know what, Loy, you're going to go into the season, and if you win that job, that's yours. But, but if you struggle and Arvidsson just comes out of the pen or relieving you and just mowing guys down left and right, well, then there you go. Then there's your answer there. So, and I think it's also interesting how you pair pitchers in this era, because you don't see a lot of just guys who are going 6, 7, 8 every time they get the ball now. You're seeing more of like tandems, like this guy pitches well after this guy complements this guy, because the lineups have to do a certain thing against this guy. But then you bring in the other side, different stuff, different arm angle, different velocity. And now they got to empty their bench. Now they got to do some stuff. Some guys just pitch well after other guys for whatever reason. And so I think it's important to not think of those as just who are the starters. I think if you want to really think about the game, you have to think about it the way the coaches do, which is, who do I pair with my Friday guy? Who do I pair with my Saturday guy? Who do I pair with my Sunday guy? And then who's going to work the middle part of the week? So that's interesting to me, because I think it's not just about who starts, but who's the first guy out of the pen.
They have plenty of bullets.
Loy Snead pairing would be pretty brutal for a lineup.
Yep, it would.
And I would not at all be surprised if Loy. It probably depends on what Tegan Kuhns does the next couple of weeks, and because Tegan Kuhns has Chase Burns, Blade Tidwell, Drew Beam, freshman potential. He does. He could go be SEC Freshman of the Year, and it probably depends on how comfortable they are with him beginning the season in the rotation. I think if he has a strong couple of weeks leading up to the season, then there's a high probability that he is in the starting rotation, and then you use Dylan Loy out of the bullpen. You mentioned Loy and Snead. Loy following up Tegan Kuhns would be fun too. That's basically another version of that, because Tegan Kuhns pumps gas, and then you've got Loy coming in right behind him, very much like Snead. So certainly a lot of options. There's all the talent in the world in that pitching staff room. It's going to look much different than it did last year. It's going to look more like the 2022 and 2023 team, to where just about everybody who steps on the mound it's going to be pumping gas. It's more high velo, more physicality, bigger bodies with this staff. Whereas, and this is not a bad thing. It comes off as a bad thing, but it's not. last year's staff was more finesse than power, and there's nothing wrong with finessing on the mound. And being more of a pitcher, the more traditional pitcher, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But this staff, it's going to be more like the staff of the 22-23 team, to where it was just high velo after high velo after high velo. And I'm sure Frank's going to have a lot of fun playing with. And there's a couple of JUCO arms to keep an eye out on as well. We'll dive into the pitching more in the coming weeks. We're going to be bringing you a podcast every Wednesday up through the end of basketball season, which is really when baseball begins to pick up as well. So we'll, during the next couple of weeks before the season, we'll dive into some of those JUCO arms and freshman arms that could potentially come out of nowhere and help as well. But it's pretty crazy. Just, I mean, two guys that we didn't even mention, Thomas Crabtree, Tanner Franklin. I mean, those two guys are going to have opportunities to earn roles. What does Marcus Phillips does? Michael Sharman, Austin Breedlove.
Phillips could be
two guys.
Phillips could be so good.
He can. It's just a matter of being consistent. But there's just so many options in that room that Frank's going to have a fun time with. We'll save our hitting. I guess we're going to talk about left field. We can save that for next week's discussion. We're running a little long here. We'll end on y'all's thoughts on Tennessee being a top 5 team in the preseason rankings from Perfect Game and D1 Baseball. D1 Baseball, Tennessee ranked number 4 to begin the season. West, Perfect Game, Tennessee ranked number 5. Your thoughts on that on the way out the door?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, those teams that are ranked ahead of Tennessee, like, I can see why they would be. So I don't have a huge issue with it. I mean, you look at like what A&M brought back, and that team came, everybody knows how close that team came to winning a title last year, and it brought more back than Tennessee did. So yeah, I mean, that stuff is fair. LSU, are they really going to struggle, be kind of middling again? I mean, I don't know. I mean, they put together good rosters down there. They tend to know what they're doing, and they can dip into pockets better than just about anybody except for maybe Texas. So, or A&M in this era. But I think I look at those teams ahead of them, and I don't have a problem with it. I think you can look at Tennessee now and the way they're recruiting and the way that they're building this thing and the track record they've had. You can guess that more often than not, they'll be around the top 10. You can just guess that. Like, that's, and you know what? They just won a title. You want to put them top 5. They're replacing a lot, but we've said that before. We've said that before. Oh man, they're replacing a lot. What are they going to do without these guys? And well, they're pretty damn good again next year. So they're going to be good. It's just, I don't think it's disrespectful. The teams that are ahead of them, I could make at least an argument to understand why that would be the case. So I don't have any issue with it at all.
Yeah, I don't have a huge issue with it, but I'm a little bit of a believer. Just put the previous national champion at 1, unless they're just like not even close to, like, if you're top 5 anyway, just put them at 1. They would just won the national championship. We were actually talking football, but it was a group text with a couple buddies of mine, and one of them, Will, who was a former pitcher in the Pirates organization. I agreed with him. He made that point, and I was like, yeah, I kind of agree. They're talking about the next season's way too early top 25 for football. It's like, just put the national championship 1, and when somebody beats them, then you can move them to where they actually should be, if that be the case. But I would like to see Tennessee just stand at 1, because they were the last team to win a game. So, but when you look at those other teams, I get it. So 4 kind of makes a little bit of sense. However, the smart people in Vegas on the early look at the betting odds, which is not something I will do anymore, going to be calling games. But it's still great information to look at. Tennessee is the favorite. Tennessee's the preseason favorite at like 7-1, 7.5-1, 8-1 odds. And then LSU, Arkansas, A&M are kind of that second group in that 10-1 to 12-1 range. So that's interesting to look at. That stuff changes throughout the year based on.
Yeah, Will, could that be? I don't mean to cut you off, but I didn't want to forget to ask this. Does that mean that, like, you're looking at it and saying, or you can make an argument that maybe Tennessee isn't the best team in the country going into the season because they're replacing a lot, but when you look at the talent they have, the pedigree the program has at this point of getting deep runs, maybe they will be the best by the end of the season.
Yeah, people who are willing to take people's money on who is going to win the national championship right now is willing to give the least return on Tennessee. That's what it means. So they don't want to open the door for smart people to come in and put a big wager on Tennessee because they think they're good. Simple as that.
It's a good way to wrap it up. They're that good. People don't want the people who like making money off of others.
We haven't seen them play a game yet. It may look totally different. When you're just talking about the talent and how the roster is constructed, yes, it's some new guys. But just in terms of, hey, they may not be ranked the highest, but the smart people have them power rated the highest. It's similar to Ohio State football right now, to where they lost to Oregon kind of early, so they were never going to be number one, but they were always the betting favorite to win the national championship. And when they lost to Michigan and everybody threw them in the trash can, they were like the third betting favorite to win the national championship. And they wouldn't have even made a 14 playoff. So, not that this is a football podcast, but I see some similarities just in terms of, hey, maybe the rankings don't show exactly what the potential is. So,
no, those are all great points. At the end of the day, it's a fair ranking. I agree with what you were saying. Look, Tennessee won the Natty, put them number one, especially when you know how talented they're going to be. But those Mississippi State and Ole Miss teams suggest that we should not do that.
They do. And like Michigan in football, you knew they basically lost everything. They didn't have, the number one player in the portal come in and Killian, and they didn't, just reload. Michigan will be good, don't get me wrong. But for this year, everybody knew like they weren't going to be repeat contenders. So they didn't rank the number one. That's cool. But Tennessee is a repeat contender as we sit here today.
Absolutely. Well, Tennessee has.
They used to say nobody could win the national championship as the number one overall.
They did.
Tennessee was the first to do so. My dad asked me last night who the last team was to win back-to-back. Anybody know the answer to that? I do not off the top of my head.
South Carolina.
Oh, that's right. 9 and 10?
I want to say it was 10 and 11, but you could be right.
The Jackie
wasn't
Bradley
that long
Jr.
ago. It was a lot more recent than a number one seed winning it. Yeah.
No, that's right. I've totally forgot about that. Because if you go to Founders Park there at South Carolina, you go in through the center field entrance. That's where most of the entrance is, behind the center field wall. And they have the national trophy displayed right there, the back-to-backs. And I always look at it when I guess I've covered 2 series there now. And you pass it every time you walk in. So I'm ashamed of myself for not remembering last night when my dad asked him, but I'm going to get off here and call him and inform him that it was the Gamecocks, who will also have an interesting season with Paul Maneri leading the way. So excited to be back doing this. I agree with the top 5-ish rankings. They're one of the 5 most talented teams in the country. The rate that they're recruiting, the depth, the way they develop, the culture, they're going to have a chance to win a national championship every year for the foreseeable future. Doesn't mean that they're going to, but they're going to give themselves a chance every year to do so for the foreseeable future. And I'm sure Tony likes that they're not number one, because even though you're 4 or 5, you can still sell, hey, these people are doubting you already. You just won the thing, and they're doubting you. I'm sure he enjoyed that. Although the next interview I hear from him, he'll downplay the rankings and the top 5 and this, that.
I don't even know. We replaced everybody. Why are we top 5? Who said we're top 5? I don't know if
we
we're
shouldn't be top 50.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
But they are a top 5. And right now, I don't even think you could say like top 5 best team in the country. You can't say that about anybody because nobody has played a game. But they have one of the 5 most talented rosters in baseball. Maybe one of the 3 most talented rosters in baseball. A&M and LSU are probably the only 2 with more talent from top to bottom, staff, hitting, coaching as well. Yeah. So it'll be another fun
A&M
season.
New coach.
A&M
new coach, LSU talent, but a lot of unproven talent at LSU.
Absolutely. So excited to detail this Tennessee baseball season. Lord knows it will be entertaining, as it always is under Tony Vitello, but excited to be back chopping it up with you all. Like I said, we will have Wednesday podcasts for the foreseeable future, likely until basketball wraps up. The week that they go to Houston, we'll try and squeeze some more in there, or if something happens, an injury, or if something happens that calls for a second podcast, we'll sit down and chop it up as well. But and we'll have Wednesday pods leading up to the season for sure. Going to try and get some guests on here to break down Tennessee, break down the sport overall, the SEC level. So guys, excited to be back and looking forward to next Wednesday already.
Definitely.
Yep. Good to be back.
Definitely. And yep, man, I can tell y'all are thrilled to be back.
My just the entire left side of my face is just a combination of somehow very numb and very painful at the same time. Those two things shouldn't go together, but right now it's like I can't feel anything, but it also hurts. So
I hope that means that you won't be able to talk to me during the basketball game tonight and point out every three that Tennessee turns down and every call that the referee did not make.
Eagle eyes, man. Eagle eyes. Eagle eyes. My brain's getting slower with age, but my eyes are as sharp as ever.
I was just grinning because I let you get away with that throwing gas comment talking about 22 and 23 when every time the game was on the line, there was a guy named Redmond Walsh on the mound. So, I let it slide,
big,
but
physical, lights up the gun.
Yeah,
Redmond Walsh.
We're just not going to have any finesse this year.
137
Dylan Lloyd
are coming right at you.
Dylan Lloyd will be out there representing the Will Heflins and the Sanders Seacrests and the Kirby Cannells and the Redmond Walshes.
I hope the pitching staff looks exactly how it's looked for the last 4 years. How about that?
I think that there's a good chance that it will.
We'll be in good shape. There will be some freshman who doesn't light up the gun, but just comes in and hammers the strike zone. What? Don't you worry.
Nick Abraham. Remember the name.
I'll be pumped to talk about him too.
Nick Abraham. Remember the name.
It'll be my guy. Wes hitched his wagon to Reese Chapman. I'm hitching my wagon to Nick Abraham. Never seen him, but I'm hitching my wagon to him.
And you can thank me on the broadcast in the future.
I'll thank you later. Hey, hopefully Pat Adams didn't take a quick flight from Gainesville to Knoxville for tonight, because I watched Florida, Missouri last night, and it was a
2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
A basketball game that started at 9 p.m. Eastern, lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes.
An S show, as you can imagine. Anytime that referee, but yeah, our one listener who knows I got to get on my one rant for the pod. Hopefully he stays long enough to listen. I'll just take my yearly jab at Pat Adams.
It's probably easier to drive down from the game in Lexington last night than from Tuscaloosa than it would be to fly from Gainesville. So
yeah,
that might be the ref tonight. We'll see.
Yeah, that was brutal down there though.
It was the game took forever to end. I'm glad that was not a Tennessee game starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. That would not have been fun to cover. But we will be back next Wednesday, and we are looking forward to doing so. For Wes Rucker and Will Heflin, I am Ben McKee. This has been another edition and the first edition of 2025 of the GoVols 247 Podcast, the Diamond Vols Podcast on GoVols247.com.